morning. This is Jock Samson, and if you ain't listening to Wrestling Cheers podcast, you are a low-down piece of shit. And if you don't listen to it, I'm going to come to your house, and I'm going to beat up your entire family, and especially your grandmama. Listen or burn in hell.
Taking your way in the world today takes everything you got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You want to go where you can see that troubles are all the same. You want to go where everybody knows your name.
And welcome back to Wrestling Cheers, where everybody knows your name, especially here on the last episode. This is Wrestling Cheers, where we like to talk about things going on in the Northeast Ohio independent wrestling scene. We used to preview shows, we used to review shows, and now we have one last interview. I'm your host, Justin Summers, and Wrestling Cheers is brought to you by Midwest Territory. If you want to, while saying goodbye to us, feel free to rate, review, and subscribe if you're ever listening to this fine podcast. Whether it be Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, RIP Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Amazon Music, Audible. I've been forgetting to mention that one. But yes, Audible, and Podbean, WrestlingCheers.podbean.com. If you want to, you can still find us on social media at Wrestling Cheers, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, facebook.com/WrestlingCheers, twitter.com/WrestlingCheers, and instagram.com/WrestlingCheer. Email, if you so choose to desire, which I don't know if that's a real phrase, but I've been saying it for so many episodes that at one point I just said, screw it, I'm just going to keep saying it. But WrestlingCheers@gmail.com. Like I said, this is the last episode of Wrestling Cheers, and we are here with a special guest, but before I get into all of that, let me just get some of this out of the way. Yes, this is the last episode. Episode 350. This has been on my mind since right around the time of episode 250. I didn't want to end on 300 because, I don't know, I didn't want it to be exactly at a particular 100 number. I do like the whole South Park Succubus episode, so Tree Fitty kind of comes from that too. But when AIW approached me last year to do the live podcast, which was great, and it's one of my, kind of like highlights of this show. But when I was approached to do it, I kind of figured out that it would be episode 300, and kind of an idea, and I had things lining up for this because this past weekend, as you're listening to this, was the AIW second annual Fonzie tournament, where last year we had the live shows. So actually the original plan for me was I was going to do the live podcast. It was going to be a little bit different. I didn't want to do the game show thing again. The idea that I was kind of like throwing around in my head was to bring people on and interview them that never got to be on the podcast. So like Tim Donst was going to be there. I've been trying to get him for years. Mance Warner was someone I was going to approach. He's someone that I've kind of wanted on, but I just honestly never pursued. Then after those two, the Duke, I don't know why I've never really approached to have the Duke on. I think it would be potentially fun conversations. I love to hear what he has to say about certain topics. And then potentially Eric Taylor, someone I wanted on. I was all going to depend on who was going to actually be there. But when it was kind of figured out that live podcasts weren't going to happen, I defaulted onto this. So this week's episode, and I'm about to bring him on here shortly, is an interview with Jock Samson. Now, to some people, that means absolutely nothing. But to me, it means a ton. See, Jock was on the very first episode, not of Wrestling Cheers, but of the Ohio Indy Report. Little quick background on me. I might have talked about it before, but just kind of like run into it is I started podcasting in 2011, May of 2011. I joined this particular podcast community, and that was my introduction, or part of my introduction to independent wrestling because there was a guy on that show and then in that community that loved independent wrestling, and through a handful of other things that kind of like led me to independent wrestling. So I started going to shows in the fall of 2011. And at that point, I had started my own podcast network on at that time, Blog Talk Radio, with a handful of friends from that community. And we all like talked about things, for the most part, not wrestling, but his podcast was actually wrestling based, but it was independent wrestling. And it was called the PK and AH Indy Spectacular. That was the initials of the two hosts, and they were PK and AH. They were both from England. So when I would go on there, I had my own segment called the Ohio Indy Report, and I would talk about shows that I had been to. And at that time was basically just PWO, which later became Prime Wrestling, which is no longer around, and of course AIW. So my show at that time was called NFL Easy Picks because I love NFL football. And me and a friend started up that show in the middle of the 2011 season. We actually started it on a defunct platform now, but we came together on Blog Talk Radio, started that show, and then when we created the network, it went to on that network. So during the NFL season, we would get together and make picks for every single game and, talk about some of the results, mostly the results of like how our teams did and then how our picks did. So in the off season, because we weren't just going to talk football during the off season, we created a second show that would go on the same time slot because that Blog Talk Radio was live. We did a show called Anything Goes, where there was no format, no nothing. Like, we just kind of did whatever. We bullshitted a little bit of something you can see that has kind of snuck into my style of not necessarily having a format to go over. But I do like having a skeleton now, but it was a way of shooting the shit and just talking about whatever, randomness, all this kind of stuff. Well, when it got to August of 2012, we had some stuff lined up where we were going to kind of get ready for the NFL season, but we had particular things for these 2 episodes of Anything Goes. The first one, I did an interview with Jessica Evil Eye, an MMA fighter who retired just last year from the UFC, well, in MMA, but she was in the UFC. This was before she was obviously in the UFC, successful at the time, but for those who don't know, I went to the same school as Jessica. We were in the same grade. We go back far. So that was my first interview. And then after that, we did a preview for WWE SummerSlam with Justin LaBar. And we had a special run-in from Aaron Bauer from AIW, but he was also in PWO as Aaron McGuire. So he comes in, does this run-in. There's a feud going on with him and LaBar. He talks all this shit, and he eventually leaves. And then he kind of approaches me, or he gets a hold of me that weekend or so and says hey, I got Jock available to do your podcast if you want. And at that point, we were about to transition towards the NFL season. And I was like, hey, I can't really do it. That was part of, had you on for that stuff, for Anything Goes. And, now I don't really have a place for it, but I had the PK and AH show. So we were going to preview Point Break from AIW. And then I was going to do it on the PK and AH show, but me and Jock got together through Skype and we previewed the show. And then I sent it in to PK and AH and they played it on the show. Well, that segment ended up becoming the first episode of the Ohio Indy Report because, as I've said before, Chandler Biggins said too bad you don't have your own podcast. And then I talked to PK and AH and, they gave me their blessing to do my own show, to actually become this spin-off of theirs. So Jock was on the first episode of the Ohio Indy Report. I don't think he's been on since. He might have helped preview a J-Lit. I'll ask him here shortly. But nonetheless, when ending this show, or just in general, I like things that kind of end how they began. And if I was going to do the live show, and surprised, by the way, I don't know whether I said it or not, I was going to do the live show and then be oh, by the way, this is it. Show's over. But the weekend of Absolution, I decided to just make the announcement because at this point I knew the live podcasts weren't happening. And going back to if the live podcast was going to happen, I was going to have Jock be episode 249, which you heard last week, and it was Eric Stevens, aka Eric Kenry, which huge shout out for him to come on. But, you know, a huge shout out to everybody who's been on the show, and I'm going to go through this list really quick before I bring Jock on. Not counting the other people that were on the Ohio Indy Report, but at least like interviews that I've done since on Wrestling Cheers. I've had guests such as Gregory Iron, Josh Bishop, Ethan Page, Derek Direction, Derek Director, Derek Dillinger, No Shame, Jimmy Shane, Matt Taylor, Robbie Starr, Jackson Argos, PME, Josh Singh, Steve Guy, El Hernando Diablo, Magnum CK, Marion Fontaine, Chuck the Truck Norris, Chuck the Truck Morris, Brittany the Wilkman, and Righteous Jesse from Kick Out at 2. And Righteous Jesse has been on. He was on numerous Christmas episodes. He was the Christmas episodes. Frankie Friend, Brock from Smokin' Jay's Barbecue. Even though we've recently had our issues, you know, still a huge shout out and thank you to Thrift Store Jobber, Matt Fantone, Chad and Zach from the Indie Cast, Eddie Only, Caden came on as a guest. We had the Savage Stash on. PB Smooth, the first black wrestler that I've had on the show. Flex Jordan, who no longer wrestles. Brian Carson, Wes Barkley, Brett Eisen, Kevin Koo, Marco Stunt, Stacy Silvers for coming on and doing a crossover with Super Fantastic, The Struggles, O'Shea Edwards, DCR, Cabana Man Dan, Ziggy Heim, Ben Center, Matt Wadsworth, Ryder Reed, One Called Manders, Charlie Butters, and Jayhawk coming on when their podcast was called Not Ready for Primetime Wrestling, Stoney Keeley, Danhausen, Space Monkey, Lord Thomas the Brute, Mr. Brickster, Colin Delaney, Stepstole Sarah, Jay Rose, Jay Gold, Veda Scott, Mouse, BJ Colangelo, appearing twice and the second time with her wife, Harmony, Nick Stapp, aka CPA, Dominic Guarini, Eric Stevens / also Eric Kenry, Lee Moriarty, Jaden Newman, Chuck Stone, Johnny Clash, JT from Marks with Mikes, Pat from the Dark Match Podcast, JT Energy, Christian Cobain, Tara Calloway, John Mosley, Smart Mark Sterling, Trey Lamar, Billy Starks, John Thorne, Kaplan coming on for a little bit of an episode, not necessarily an interview, Jocelyn Navarro, Xavier Franklin, Jackson Stone, AC Mack, Brian Myers, our good friend Will from the Co-Host Wrestling Show, Aiden Von England, Jeff Cannonball, both Marty and Sarah from Marty and Sarah Love Wrestling, Sid Von England, Glenn Lane, Dylan Hornswoggle Postel, Adam Van, Alex Kane, Isaiah Broner, Bulking Season, Big Sue Jackson, TME, Shaw Mason, The Boar, Pete from Juggalo Rewind, and last but certainly not least, Jake Clemens. And there is also a ton of people that have been on for previews and reviews, you know, going back to the Ohio Indy Report days, Dustin Alberti, Juicy Pat Lucy, and I think we had Peyton Vince back then too. And then coming into Wrestling Cheers, you know, we had Caden, and Caden was a regular for quite some time here on the show. Obviously, we also had Ed from Pod Van Dam. We had Ed Batts, which is where we got Young Ed and Old Ed. And after a while, I dropped calling him Young Ed because Batts really wasn't on the show anymore. So we just, you just had Ed from Pod Van Dam, or now from Hi Ya Bussy. You know, we also had Charlie Butters, Pam, Stacy, Brock from Smokin' Jay's Barbecue, Rick Nelson, Thrift Store Jobber, Pat, aka Ronald Two Legs. You know, and also huge shout out to Caden, episode that I kind of forget about from time to time. Episode 68 was an episode that, granted, I was on because I'm the one that puts everything together and all that kind of stuff, but there was an episode where Caden got a bunch of interviews when he was at Shimmer, and I always forget to count them on like my list, because the list that I have is like people that have just been on the show that I've been on with and everything. But also Charlie Evans, Jessica Troy, Shaza McKenzie, and Nicole Matthews. Those were all interviews, small interviews that Caden did on his own, and I threw them together for an episode. And geez, that was back in 2018. We also had one of our last editions, Marcy. And then I think for there was a handful of shows we had Kenny from the Mystery Men and Orange Flaccidity. I think that's everybody. I just sat there here and went through a bunch of episodes. I actually had a list too on my phone that I would keep names down of people who could possibly be on previews, reviews whenever I would ask them, because I never wanted it to be someone else's responsibility but mine to be on the show. Because a lot of times, people got other things they want to do, need to do, or, their work schedule is just a little bit different from mine, to where, mine's for the most part been fairly consistent. But I'm hoping I didn't miss anybody, because that would suck. And there probably is like one or two people that I'm forgetting about. But huge shout out to everybody that I mentioned. And if I forgot somebody, like I said, still thank you. I couldn't do a lot of Wrestling Cheers on my own. I mean, I do, kind of a bulk of it, but when it comes to like the discussing and scheduling, it's a little different. I mean, technically I did forget some of the wrestlers towards the end. So, I had Jocelyn on prior. I had, Isaiah Broner on prior, but Sam Holloway and Austin James also coming on for some of the last previews, which, harkens back to the idea that I had for the Ohio Indy Report, where I would try to bring wrestlers on. I mean, like, that's why Jock was in the first episode, because I thought that was a unique thing, kind of. And there were podcasts out at that time that would kind of do previews or reviews of shows, but a lot of times it was like, it wasn't necessarily consistent. Like, that was like, 1 week they, might preview AIW, but, the next week, then I might be talking more about a Beyond show or something like that. And that's kind of where I got the idea. And that was kind of my thing for the Ohio Indy Report as a whole, is there was no one dedicated to this scene. And I've actually, I kind of mentioned it before about how I kind of put kind of like a claim, or, kind of this like restriction thing, where it's like, because when I started there were no podcast dedicated to this scene, or, that did a lot of previews and reviews type things. It was just wrestlers going on, or people going on other podcasts to do that. And same thing with live tweeting, was people, there was no one dedicated to just live tweeting AIW. It was someone who, like, they would come out for a show and they might live tweet it, but it wasn't every show. There was no dedicated person. And that's where I stepped up. So when years later, all of a sudden, all these other podcasts start to like pop up or whatever, like, I kind of took offense. Like, hey, when I did this, there was nobody. And now you're trying to step in on what I felt like was my territory. Now, I never really cared for, AIW doing it, because AIW is going to give you something different. They're going to give you a more company-based thing. They're not going to throw out the same kind of predictions that I would on a preview, or, some of the panelists would, because we're fans and we're going to speculate. And, some of our speculations could be right. And that's not something they necessarily want. So to me, that was something different. And then when At Odds, when they were doing some small previews, reviews, I looked at that as also something different, because Joe is going to give you a more, I say more insider, as in someone who's inside the business is going to look at things a little bit differently than I would. I think he fits somewhere between what I was doing, or what we were doing with Wrestling Cheers, and what AIW was doing. Maybe a little bit closer to AIW, because a lot of times he seemed to be in the know on a lot of, I don't say everything, but like on a lot of things. So he wasn't going to exactly come out and say things. So that I never cared about either. But I know that, IW Guide, or IWTV Guide, that was called before, or even Not Ready for Primetime Wrestling, where they wanted to review AIW stuff. And I was just like, hey, like, can you just do something else? And same thing with Powell Driver podcast. I kind of expressed the same thing to them after they did a review of an AIW show that they went to. And the way I looked at it for them was like, no offense, guys, like, you aren't as well versed in this, and you're really not going to like do it justice at that point. Like, just let me do it. And, when I lifted the embargo when I lifted that restriction, now it doesn't matter. And now even more, it doesn't matter. But for me, it was just a respect thing. Because like I said, when I started, there was nobody. And then have people come in trying to do the exact same thing as me, just not a fan. Now I've matured in my time because, I had kind of issues with Marks with Mikes and the Dark Match podcast when they first started, because I felt like, oh, you're coming in on my territory. That did leave some bad blood between both of those podcasts, but, we buried the hatchet of quite some time ago, and, we're good. And that's like part of my maturing process of just going like, okay, I don't have to create enemies here. I can talk to these people and like we can come to an understanding, and that's where I was towards the end. But a huge shout out to everybody. I'm going to go through the plugs now because there's no need to go through them at the end. I already mentioned where you could find the show on the social media, but friends of the show, Hiya Bussy, a wrestling adjacent podcast. As a whole, huge shout out to Ed, all his support through all the years. And, working for Pod Van Dam for a while was fun. I was actually going to leave the show right around the time that it ended. So it kind of worked out for both sides, because I was kind of getting tired of some things. And, that was kind of like all right, I'm going to be done at the end of the year. Well, it turns out the show was ending, so it didn't necessarily matter. But Ed has shown me a lot of support through the years, and I thoroughly love him for it. Super fantastic podcast might not be, a regular show, but Stacy's support through the years too has been something that I have valued. And, he's somebody that, I remember meeting in line at AIW outside of Mount Carmel, and I love talking with him. He's got such a great voice. Happy he has his own podcast, and whenever it comes back or whatever he's going to do, support the dude and all that. I'm going to be honest with some of these plugs too. The IndyCast was a podcast that, we were good for many years. And then the past couple of years, I still kind of promote them. They're on the plug list, but, I tag them in every episode, and we used to have a thing, and I still believe that this is kind of how it should be for a lot of promotions. People that promoting things, promotions type thing, is that I tag you in my stuff, you tag me in your stuff, and then we retweet both sides. We're going to support each other. I don't necessarily get that with the IndyCast anymore. I used to. Well, not anymore, sadly, but they're still good. Sobros, Sobros used to do a lot of wrestling stuff, but the wrestling guy left. And yeah, it's just, they don't do as much with wrestling. And then, with Southern Underground Pro not really being active for the past year or so, still good with them. Still good with Stoney Keeley and all that. Great people. Love seeing them succeed. Game Marks podcast. One point I had Game Marks podcast on here and Off the Hop Rope, supporting those, major wrestling figure podcast network shows that are not necessarily as big as their flagship show. And I've had, people from both on this show. So I felt like it was more appropriate to throw them out there. And I subscribe to the Game Marks podcast Patreon. It's a great show, and I suggest everybody check it out. I never threw it on here, but Going Postal is a show that I highly recommend. Stars, yes, Dylan Postal, a.k.a. Hornswoggle, a.k.a. Swoggle, and the other guy on the Game Marks podcast that was not on here, George Feast. And you get to see a whole other side of Dylan, and I thoroughly enjoyed that one too. Power Bomb Jitsu, been friends with these guys for, many years. I'll openly admit I don't listen to them a lot, but I know at one point, I threw some interview suggestions out to them because I was like, I'm probably never going to get to these, but it makes sense for you guys to interview them. And then I mentioned Power Driver Podcast, a newer podcast that has shown up within the last year, and they're doing a lot of stuff that I was doing early on with Wrestling Cheers. So support them too. Fully Posable, have all the figure related shows that, Major Wrestling Figure Podcast and all those related shows, I should say. But, I'm a huge supporter of those, and I end up getting into Fully Posable about 3 years ago. I appear on there every few weeks, sending in a listener question Jeff and Scott are great dudes. I appeared on there too, on a full episode. Wildly support those dudes. And one of the reasons why I supported them was because, hey, you guys are like me. You're independent. And I like showing those kind of type of podcast love. Also skipped over them in my, on my list here, Biff Radio. Ben has been on the show, and he's someone that I kind of mentored a little bit with podcasting, gave him my thoughts, opinions on what he was doing. I think he's one person that it goes to show you that if you get a roadcaster, you can thoroughly improve what you're doing by just plugging it in. And that's not a knock on Ben, because some of this podcasting stuff takes time. If you go back and listen to some of the early Ohio Indy Report stuff, or even the early Wrestling Cheer stuff, like, there are episodes where the audio is horrible. And I know Ben had some of those issues early on. One of which, there were some episodes where, like, the volume was down too low. And, like, I was driving in my truck, or, the one I had for work at the time, and I have the shit blasted, and I could, like, barely hear it. It's not that it was necessarily soft, but it's just one of those things you learn, like, the right level that everything should be at. So I passed on my advice. And I'll be brutally honest, Ben, you didn't do it at first, but once you got the roadcaster, it did some of that work for you, so it made it easier for you. And that's, I've not had an issue with anything. I've listened to you for quite some time. Like, granted, I don't listen to the show much anymore, and that's the other thing with how my life has been over the past few years, or just like anytime I went through a job change, my podcasting listening changed to where I would have more time or less time. And with when I got to my new job, there was a lot of like less time for shows. So there was a lot that I cut. And Biff Radio, unfortunately, that was one of them, because I didn't necessarily want to listen to like a lot of the music that you're playing. But if I saw a topic or an episode that sounded good, I made sure I listened to it. There's also Positively Pro Wrestling. I was on that show, and Steve and Eric are great dudes. Even before like I started interacting with them, like I respected what they did, and it was like a different style podcast, and they're great dudes. And there's another episode that I've appeared on, IW Guide, Indie Wrestling Guide, IWTV Guide, Not Ready for Primetime Wrestling. It's another podcast that I kind of help mentor early on. I feel like now Charlie doesn't need me anymore. But there was times that he was another person I would mentor, be like, hey, you got to do this. And he'd be like, nah. In a way, he'd be like, no, I'm fine. And something would end up happening. I want to say there might have been like a problem with a recording one time. And I explained to him, and this isn't fucking serious. I will record a minimum of 2 things at one time type thing. Fucked up that sentence and how to word it. But basically, I will have 2 things recording during an episode. Because if one thing fails, I normally have another that's separate. And there's been times, depending on what I'm doing, that I could do 3. Some of these episodes lately that have been done on Zoom, I could record on there. I think I only did it for like 1 or 2. But it doesn't hurt to have backup or a backup plan. So that's something that I learned the hard way. But they have progressed, and I think they've now turned into this hodgepodge of like Pod Van Dam and Wrestling Cheers. And, that's what they want to be. That's what they want to be, trying to fill 2 voids of 2 shows. I support them as much as I can, but that show has come a long way. Even like, I'll openly admit, back when they were not ready for primetime wrestling and I was friends with them, like, I purposely kept them off the plug list because the show wasn't that good. I wanted them to like learn and kind of get better with some things before I put them on the plug list. And it wasn't being mean. It's just like, hey, I had people. I'm not going to say who told me this. Had someone connected with the show one way or another, listened to Kick Out at 2 one time. Kick Out at 2, I thoroughly love them. Did I love how they recorded and how, no offense, Jesse, how bad the audio was at sometimes? No, I did not like that at all. But that was kind of like early in some of my maturing process with them, because they were a podcast that I had issues with, that I said, you know what, that's kind of like their style. Kind of let it be. It's not hurting anybody to do what they're doing. If they're happy with it, they're happy with it. But, I had someone who listened to them kind of complained to me about how bad their audio was. Now, it was literally in the handful of like last episodes they had where Brittany was no longer, well, not that she was no longer there. She was out of town for work for quite some time. And, you know, it was Jesse having to get a new computer and find different ways to record. And yeah, like some of those episodes audio wise were bad. And this person, you know, said like, hey, I tried listening to them. It was horrible. I couldn't do it. So would be a reason, like I said, why I kind of kept Not Ready for Primetime Wrestling off the plug list. If you catch my grift, I will openly admit this is not a show that I listen to, but this involves people that I consider friends, and I think people should listen to them. Like if it's something that you're into, give them a listen. Might not be my thing, but doesn't mean it's not your thing. You know, I already mentioned Marks with Mikes. You know, JT and I were enemies for a while. And then in 2019, we buried the hatchet, shook hands, and we've been good ever since. Anytime we see each other, you know, slap hands and all that. Greetings, how you doing, blah, blah, blah. And he's a great dude. He's a dude that I haven't seen in a while, and I'm going to openly say that I miss seeing. So huge shout out to Marks with Mikes, JT, and of course Cheech too. Cheech, I haven't seen him as much lately, but you know, he was a dude that would show up at AIW shows, and you know, he was a really cool dude. Juggalo Rewind. Listen, there's been lately a big thing of being a juggalo around AIW, and I love it. I'm getting like deeper back into it, and it's partially because of Juggalo Rewind, but you know, that's a fandom that I was a big part of for many years. Stepped away from it, then came back like 15 years later, and you know, it means a lot to me. And I'm looking at the fandom differently now than when I was a teenager, for the good and for the bad. And Juggalo Rewind is a show that I love listening to. I'm going to get a little bit more involved in it through some listener participation coming up. But also, I know I'm going to be on their next season, because what they do is they pick an album within the Juggalo universe, and they review it, or they go over it track by track, episode by episode. So each season is an album. They just finished season 4, which is Blaze You Dead Homies, One Less G in the Hood. Season 1 was Twisted's the Most Tasteless. Season 2 was Dark Lotus, Tales from the Lotus Pod, both versions. Season 3 was Wizard of the Hood. And then there was these like small bonus seasons that weren't necessarily numbered that covered like the Christmas album, one of the How the Wicked singles or CDs that had like different few tracks on it. And after I had Pete on, he told me what the next season's going to be, and I claimed an episode. I was like, well, I want to be on episode 4. I'll reveal it here, kind of. I'm not going to go into full detail. Episode 4 is going to be a song called The Greatest Show. If you know the album it's off of, or set, it's not really an album, wink, wink. But if you know what it's off of, and you know why it's number 4, yeah, that's why I'm going to be on it. And for those who don't know, I will say The Greatest Show is the ICP version of the Oddities theme. So that's kind of why I called it. Then everything goes well, I should be on the episode. But we are some time away from that, so I'm looking forward to it. So shout out to Juggalo Rewind. X-Over. Again, I honestly don't listen to X-Over, but Marcy is a part of Wrestling Cheers, and Marcy is a part of IW Guide, and she's a part of, the AIW family. So I want to support her in what she's doing. The least thing I could do is, throw the shout out on the podcast. If what she's doing is something you're interested in, check her out. Check out X-Over. This Ends at Prom. I had BJ and Harmony on. Those are some great, wonderful women. And I enjoy listening to that podcast whenever I can. It's not a ton, but if they post an episode of a movie I've already seen, I listen to it. If they post an episode of a movie I haven't seen, but then later I see it, after I see it, I go back, listen to the episode. Most of the episodes are evergreen, or most parts of the episode are evergreen. So you don't feel too out of place. But a huge shout out to them. And like I said, even though I'm not necessarily on great terms with Thrift Store Jobber, check out Meet Me at Applebee's. His NASCAR podcast, if NASCAR is something you are interested in, check him out. Also not really on great terms with At Odds with Wrestling, but, check them out. Joe and Adam do a good job. And it was a show that I always enjoyed listening to. Other friends of the show, the Mystery Men. Kenny has shown a lot of support through Wrestling Cheers, even going back to the Ohio Indy Report, and I love him for it. Can't wait to see him again. And also, it's crazy, like, how much stuff that we also support. Like, obviously, he supports AIW, which is what, how he got into the Ohio Indy Report. He supports Fully Posable. He supported Off the Hop Rope. So he is a great dude. So check the Mystery Men out. Redline Radio, people I've made friends with over the past handful of years. And, I was on Redline Radio a couple times, like live in studio. They used to do a lot of stuff with OCW, but OCW kind of, in a way, had people split from Redline and work with them. And then they started their own network type thing, which is, I know it's where Pile Driver comes from. So, but still not taking sides. Check out Redline Radio. I can't say enough about Mouse's Wrestling Adventure. Great dude, great family. Billy is right now just really starting to show the world what she has. And I still think there's a ton more left, but he's been a great supporter of the show throughout the years. And hopefully I get to meet Mouse one day. VHS Party Tonight on Instagram and Danger Zone Video in Joliet, Tennessee, both run by our good friend Righteous Jesse. And he's another person, I mentioned about the issues I had with Kick Out of 2 and all that kind of shit. And we have developed a great friendship over the past 5 years. Went from being enemies to now being like good friends. Been on this show a ton for Christmas episodes, as well as really fueling my physical media collection bug. Heart of Gold. I love Jonah. I think I've been to Heart of Gold twice. It's not exactly an easy place for me to get to. It's not like it's, right around the corner type thing. Great food. Love Jonah. Love supporting him, and love the old company. Good company too. Toy Ohio Toy Show. That's something that I've been a supporter of since, I think early 2019. Toy Ohio Toy Show and Time Capsule Toys. Rick, great dude. Missed Tom Troll, but there were many Toy Ohios that me and Stacy found ways, or me and Butters found ways to talk about here on the show. Smoke and Jay's Barbecue. Brock's a great dude. Another great supporter of the show. At one point, there was the promo to get a discount. I don't think that's necessarily a thing anymore because there's not necessarily a physical location, but love Brock. And I just seen him this past weekend. 20 by 20 Apparel, ran by the same people that do Juggalo Rewind. They also do a lot of stuff with old wrestling, like they sponsor a lot of shows, but they're also sponsoring the Detroit show because they are from, Detroit. JCP Designs, great dude. Obviously we have our own graphic designer. Get to him here in a few, but I love what he does, and I love his connection to the community as a whole. Midwest Territory. I was supposed to post my stuff through there, but I ended up never doing it because I used to be a part of the Trending Topics Network. I left them in the spring of last year because I knew this day was coming, and I just wanted to not have to pay for the dues and everything for another year and everything. So I was just I'm good for now. I'm just going to do this instead. Just post it on its own feed still. But I was going to do something similar where I would post however through them. Just never did it, but I do give them a shout out and say that it's brought to you by Midwest Territory. Southern Underground Pro, they haven't been active in a while, but we had a year, sponsored every single show, and, I got to go down to a show. Just great people all over that scene. If they come back, check them out. Check out old footage. Check out anything of them. They are great people down there in Nashville. Moy Boy Designs, the official graphic designer of Wrestling Cheers since day one. One of the things that I wanted to do was not necessarily get outside people. Early on with Wrestling Cheers, I was focusing on AIW. we were getting local, obviously, fans to be on the show. Kind of changed a little bit, but the whole point is like, everything is here. Why don't I get one of us to do the logos? And Moy Boy has done me good. He's done fine by me. And I've, commissioned him to do some other projects outside of Wrestling Cheers. One being something that I'm going to spend a lot of time on going forward, or some of this time that I'm going to have left over now. The Kent Browns backers. He designed our new logo, and we get a ton of compliments for it. I'm the one that commissioned it, came up with kind of the design idea, but it was Moy Boy that absolutely killed it. And another shout out I want to throw on here, when we used to be on the Trading Topics Network, there was a list of shows that we would plug. Two that I want to mention right now. Number one, All Beer Inside. Carp has been a friend of mine through many years. For many years, we've done different shows together along with our friend Keith. And, seeing him getting out there doing things like I have done with Wrestling Cheers, but with beer, is cool to see, and a huge love and shout out to him. And then the last one I'm going to mention is the Spanish Announce Table. They just celebrated 10 years of their podcast. I've had them on here, Tim and Tom, and these are dudes that I go back a long time with. And, Tim more than Tom. I met Tom through Tim, but when they started the Spanish Announce Table, Tim and I go back to a show called the AllWrestling.com Week in Review. And that was my first podcast I participated on and was a part of. And him and I worked together on that show fairly quick. And kind of one of my older internet friends through podcasting. I don't listen to that show a ton. Just, again, cutting shows when I change jobs. But, yeah, huge shout out to them. Especially on 10 years. I do make appearance on the 10-year episode, sending in a submission, congratulating them and stuff. So if you can, it was last week's episode, check that out. Spanish Announce Table. So I've had Jock on hold for quite a while. So let's bring him on now. Jock, sorry for the long wait, but how are you doing this evening?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good, man. How are you?
Dude, it's been quite a while, but I'm wrapping up this show. You're wrapping up your career, and it seems fitting because you were on the very first episode of the Ohio Indy Report.
Yeah, I think I remember that. Wasn't it after Absolution 7?
Yes, it was.
I believe
it was after Absolution 7, and then right before Point Break.
Ah, that's right. I mean, man, it's been a long. I mean, what is AIW? What is this? Their 15th or 16th Absolution?
They just had Absolution. They just had Absolution 16, and then you got to figure too. There were 2 years without it. 2020 and 2021 did not have Absolutions.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so 16th, and man, I think that was my daughter. Well,
yeah,
because we had a big storm here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I remember staying at my mother-in-law's, and I had to shave my whole body outside on the porch because nobody had electricity for like 3 weeks. Because I mean, derecho came in and knocked the shit out of them. People had generators going crazy, fighting over all the gas and food and shit. So I think it was 12. Jesus.
Yeah, it was 2012. Yeah, because that's when I first started doing the whole podcast thing, because it was because we recorded for a show that I was doing a segment on called the Ohio Indy Report, and then Biggins told me when I was leaving Point Break, too bad you don't have your own show. And that got me thinking. I'm like, oh shit, I could start my own thing up, and then yeah.
And then here we are, 11 years later.
And yeah, I did
crazy.
I did the rebrand to Wrestling Cheers years later. This is episode 350, and you yourself are close to wrapping up your career.
Yeah, this is my last year. I've decided that I got a lot of stuff in my life. My daughter is 9 years old now, which is insane to think.
Yeah.
I'm coaching her softball teams, and I just never thought I would be wrestling this long. It'll be my 18th year starts on October 30th. I've had over 1,156 matches.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had a pretty good run. And I think it's just about time to, and I'm not saying I'm retiring because I think it's absolutely stupid to say you retire in professional wrestling. We quit. We leave the business. We don't get no pension. We don't get no 401k. We don't get none of that. Mostly, we just quit, and I'm weird in a way because when I'm done, I don't want all the pomp and circumstance that a lot of people get. If I don't have to, if I can I'm not doing no big speech after my last match. I don't want to have a 30-minute match, but if I'm forced to do it, I'm going to make sure that I'm not going to be a dickhead. You got to put over the young talent. You got to tell everyone how good they are, which they really are good. Mm-hmm. You need to take time in your speech to talk about them and the future of the business, to make sure you let people know that it's in good hands. Mm-hmm. Instead of, I've seen retirement speeches where someone just talked about themselves for 30 minutes. And yeah, we get it. It's about you, but it's also about the next generation. So I just want to go away. I want to lose and go away. Put my boots on. I take my damn boots off, stick them in the middle of the ring. Because if somebody pays me to come back for one match, I'll come and do a match here or there. One match a year, maybe 2 matches, or I'll just, if I do, I do. If I don't, I don't. I got no responsibility. I ain't got to worry about lugging no championship belt around. If I want to go do something, I'm going to go do something. There's a lot of stuff that I've never gotten to do in the last 17 years. I get jealous when I go to a wrestling show and I see people cooking out on a Saturday. And I'm like, man, why can't I do that today?
Yeah.
Why can't I go swimming with my family today? But no, I got to go put the spandex on. Well, back in the day when I did it, I pissed people off. Now they like me. So, but it's definitely a different world for sure. But it's time to make it about my daughter.
Yeah.
My wife, that damn Linda. That damn Linda, dragon lady is what I call her. But I'm just looking forward to it, man. I really am.
It's a little bit how I feel of like how I'm hanging everything up. I don't want to say I'm retiring or quitting because I feel like eventually I could be like, I want to do this again. But my big thing is like having to put out a podcast weekly is super annoying. And just kind of like you were saying of how you get jealous of other people. Like there's times like I want to come home and just like, maybe I don't want to do anything. I just want to like eat dinner and go to bed. But instead like, oh no, I got to edit this podcast and everything. And it was a lot of fun for a point, but at this point it's like, I'm going to take roughly, I say a year off and then I'll decide from there, but I'm not doing weekly. That I could very much well after a year go like, yeah, I'm done. I'm not coming back. I'm enjoying my time too much. So,
isn't it crazy? Like I've never been jealous of another pro wrestler, but I get jealous of regular people doing regular things.
Yeah. And
I knew when I started getting jealous of regular people, I saw some dude walking his dog one day, and I was like, "What an arrogant piece of shit!" And now I'm sitting in a damn car and destroying my body, and I'm stiff as a 2x4, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but yeah, man. I'm good. It feels, what it is. I think people can hang on too long,
mm-hmm.
And that people can live their lives however they want to, but sometimes you just hang on too long. And I'm 44, man. Nobody wants to see my old ass. Granted, they don't talk like me and they don't act like me, but it is a different business now, and I got to leave it to them in better shape. Hopefully, I left in better shape than so. Hopefully.
There's crazy thing that I just remembered out of nowhere too. I forgot that you were at my first AIW show, and it wasn't even just you had a match there. I want to say that might have been your debut. Where you
was I lingering around in the crowd?
Yeah, it was Hell Under 7. Yep, and then you attacked the dude.
Yeah, I remember that.
Because I remember at that time, like not necessarily knowing who you were, but it's like, all right, this guy's in gimmick walking around. Like, what's this about? And then whenever Duke's match came up, which halfway through the show or something, you attacked him and led on to that feud. And it's just like, oh shit, I forgot about that.
I remember how that all came to be. So when JT Lightning passed away, and everyone knows, great Cleveland promoter, Biggins did a memorial show for him.
Mm.
And I got a story here later that was a crazy story that happened. I'm in the Memorial Battle Royal, and I got them rodeo clown boots that I wore for years.
Mm.
And Biggins kept putting them over. It's like, I love those boots. So if it wasn't for those boots, I would have never gotten booked at AIW. And the first time I got the call, I've never heard of AIW. And I had no idea it had the steam that it did.
Mm-hmm.
I had no clue because I'm completely oblivious to or anything. If it doesn't involve my career,
mm-hmm.
I know how to do me. But so if it wasn't for that, like I remember someone said, I saw you at AIW, man, that's great. And I'm going, cool, man. It was because I started seeing all the people that were roaming around and, met Thorne, met Biggins. And it was in the same building, that church where JT Lightning ran his last show, whenever that was, maybe
mm-hmm.
a year before.
Okay.
And I wrestled Wildfire Tommy Rich for him. And then I was involved in the bloody, and I don't, but they said, you got to go get involved in Madman Pondo and the Sheiky's match. And I'm like, holy fucking shit, they're out there bleeding goddamn buckets. You could see me not touching them with my fucking hands. I want nothing to do with it. I go break the pin up, those most piece of shit breakup you've ever seen in your life, because I'm not wanting to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to find something with Pondo that was not covered in blood to pick him up to get beat up. And I think I got more of these than I needed to. So Wildfire runs him off. That AIW did that show, and I just kept walking around and people, wondering who the fuck I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Hannah Haas, JT's daughter, was running the concession stand. She just kept, because the only thing they were selling was Natty Light. I bet you I went through 22 beers before, was jumping, before I had to jump the guardrail and get on the Duke. It was just kind of funny because when I was trained, you never saw guys in the ring before the show going over their matches. Like, it was taboo, like, coming up for me.
Yeah.
To get in the ring and pre-plan your match. Like, if you got caught planning your match where I was trained in West Virginia, the old timers would kick you out of the locker room and fire you.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there looking, my wife came with me and they're like, what are you, I'm sitting there going like, what the fuck are they doing? Why are they going through this whole song and dance? And it just confused the shit out of me. And I understand that, and you catch me doing it now. And I bet you my first 300 matches, or first 200 matches, I never called a spot in the back.
Mm-hmm.
I just was forced to go to the ring and call it. And I would refuse for anybody to tell me what they wanted to do. And I was like, well, I'm the heel. I'm going to go out there and call this goddamn thing. So I think that's why I was always comfortable in my skin from the get-go, is because I was forced to call everything in the ring, and I had to listen to guys who'd beat your ass if you fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to, come up, but to catch guys in there calling the matches, that just blew my mind. I was like, what in the fuck? Are they trying to get there? Are they trying to get fired here or what? I'm just walking around and drinking beer all night. Then I did the spot and went home, went to Denny's. Yeah.
It's crazy just to think about just that feud. Cause like what I tell people too, like around that time, like if you go back and just relive that feud in particular, the fact that the Duke since after your match has been heel ever since, it feels so weird to watch like good guy Duke come out and, smile like, but I lived it. I remember it, but still I can go back and relive and go, oh, that just feels weird.
Yeah. Like when I first met him, I'm going, this guy's going to be the baby face. I'm like, he's kind of a natural dickhead. I mean, and he is, I'm not going to ruin anything, but I actually like the guy.
Yeah.
So we started talking, never met him before in my life, because when they hit, Biggins is the one that booked me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was Biggins. Yeah, it was Biggins, because Biggins was a fan of guys like me.
Yeah.
He wanted more guys like me, and but I'm sitting there talking to him and I'm going, all right, we're going to do this thing. And he's like, we're going to do something, whatever. And then the rest is history. We had like it was a really good story. And that's what pro wrestling is to me, is the story. If you just put me and him in there and let us have matches with nothing that means anything, that bull rope match at Absolution don't mean shit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, the fact that me and him, that they sent these two old school fat dudes, you know, one with a beard, one clean shaven, went and stole a show at Absolution, absolutely blows my mind compared to what people, you know, and I don't know if we stole it or not. I just know a lot of people believe it was the best Absolution match of all time, which, wow. You know, me and Duke like to tell everybody that because I know it pisses some people off, but
I think
the fact that we got there was incredible.
At this point, like, it is so memorable. And you talk about, like, it is that story. And are there matches that are up there in Absolution history? I'm going to say yes. Especially, like, you know, you had Gage and Donst, the type of a match that they had. Kingston and Ethan Page. But I think maybe it's on paper for someone outside of AIW, you know, the Duke versus Jock Samson is a match you would look over, but being around for that storyline and having the match that you guys did, like, I really can't tell you off the top of my head other things that happened on that show. I know the Briscoes were there and they went against the Irish Airborne. They were there.
Yep.
And I think
Adam Cole was there.
I think he was too. And then the main event is when Nixon debuted. But, like, when I think of that Absolution, the first thing I think of is you and the Duke. And I know, like, a couple actually during COVID in 2020, I like revisited that pay-per-view and, like, we did a review on it. And it's like, yeah, that match is still fun.
It was weird because when we came to the back, we had all the young guys that did all the acrobatic moves. They were tapping their hands. I was like, I've never had. First time I've ever had a standing ovation. Not taking that back the second time. You know, it was just, when you have a match like that, like, there's no feeling, you know, in your profession that makes you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that feeling in that match was the best match I ever had in my career. So nothing will ever, you know, at AIW, nothing to me will ever top that I was involved. I mean, we've tried and tried and tried. Like, when you have your first big match and it's the best match, you know, on the show, boy, goddamn, it's hard to top that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but yeah, it was something memorable. I remember that was the first time he ever bled in a match, and he did too hard and he couldn't see.
Okay, and then other thing I remember, because I think I was right in front of it, that old ass table that I think had trouble breaking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It had trouble breaking. He went to get me one time and I just fell right off of it. He slipped right off. Like, he went to jump on me and I couldn't believe it didn't break.
Mm-hmm.
And then he finally gets me up, walks me to the middle, and then he drops. Then the crowd just goes nuts, starts saying, holy shit. And then, you know, I remember someone posting said that Jock just still the show here at Absolution show with, like, the Airborne and the, you know, all these big name guys that are real good wrestlers, you know. I'm not saying we're not good wrestlers. We're a different type. But the style that we work, the fact that people love that match. But like I said, the story was what made the match.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were ready to see that. And then Duke supposedly retired.
we talk about retiring.
We're talking about retiring.
He's the hospital champion.
Still going strong. Still going strong.
Yeah. So even, like, outside of the Duke too, like, your AIW career, like, I don't mean to, like, just, like, deep dive into your AIW career, but just some of the things I think of too. I don't mind. You also got to work with Tracy Smothers.
Oh man, hey, I tell you right now, there's never been a guy who I've ever worked with that was more selfless than him.
Mm-hmm.
He would go out of his way to make sure that I was okay, that I was comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, I remember we had a match, and it was during J-Lit weekend, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they had it booked like it was some, you know, big, technically physical encounter. And anybody that knows Tracy or me, we're just going to sit there and talk shit.
Yep.
So we have a match to where we talked for 30 minutes to start the match, and neither one of us took a bump. The crowd was into the match, and it was, it was the most absurd match I've ever had the pleasure of having in my life. And I mean absurd in a good way. Right in the middle of the match, the submission squad, who's a name from the past, they come in and jump me and Tracy. So Tracy then gets on the microphone and says, I'm going babyface right now. We're going to have a tag team match. Yeah. I turned my back. He says, I'm going heel. Whoop, I'm just kidding. I'm going babyface. And he went heel face like a couple times. And then, and neither one of us took a single goddamn back bump. And the crowd was really that I get the pin. Mm-hmm. Like, no, I don't need it. I don't need the pin. I'm like, yes, sir. Whatever you want to do. I was just like, whatever you want to do, sir. I'm completely 150% okay with. And we had an hour. We had an hour and a half long ass match, and it's incredible to think that we didn't even take a single goddamn back bump. Shows you how good Tracy is. But we didn't. We were also the match that was different than every other match too. Mm-hmm. But they came and told Tracy, take as long as you want. Okay.
Yeah, that's
as long as you want to go.
That sounds like a typical Tracy Smothers match, and I mean that as a compliment, because there's one of my favorite matches is him versus Colt Cabana, and yeah, it's about 20 minutes before that match, before the bell rings. It's great. I loved it, and going back and revisiting it a handful of years ago, I was like, oh my god, I loved every moment of this before, and I love it now.
I have stole so much shit that Tracy Smothers taught me and that I put in my career. I still do a lot of stuff that he would do because that's something I would, I realized after wrestling him, this is the shit I should do. This is shit that I would do. Mm-hmm. I kept calling him Uncle Tracy. We had a tag team match with me and Tracy versus Colt and Cliff Compton.
Okay, yeah.
So Tracy would disappear from time to time, and it was on a Sunday of Wrestle Rager, and I remember I got so goddamn fucking drunk the Saturday night because Ohio State lost to Virginia Tech, and we all know how I am about that. And I remember puked. This hotel had 2 sinks. I puked in both sinks, and then puked in the toilet, and I puked in the tub. Mm-hmm. That's how much I puked. And so when my buddy got up to wash his hands, he went to one sink, there's vomit in it. He went to the other sink, there's vomit in it. Then he went to the toilet, there's vomit in it, plus shit. Then looked at the bathtub, and there's vomit in it. Because I had to go do that match with one of the worst hangovers I ever had in my life. But Tracy, so we're getting ready talking over the match and going through things, and Tracy would come in and throw something in, then he'd walk away. He'd come back, throw something in, walk away. So everything that we had planned for me to do, because I know my job is to take an ass kicking, because I was supposed to be the young guy for Tracy, and everything that I was supposed to take, he gave me the night off because he knew I was hungover, and he went and did the stuff without telling me. He just hopped in the ring and did everything spot for spot that I was supposed to do to give him the night off. I never asked for it, but he just was a good dude. He cared about people. He knew I had a rough night. He was at the bar. He saw me. I had a rough night. So, what a wonderful human being. And I got to work with him so much. I think for a 2-year span, it was me and him at AIW. For a long time. They eventually brought Bunkhouse Buck in with Robert Parker, me and him. We were hanging out. We got to the point at AIW to where we would have all the older name guys that Biggins liked, and we'd all be sitting at a table playing cards, drinking Natty Light, and Missy Hyatt's there, Buck's there, Dick Justice was there, Colonel Rob Parker and his third leg was there. The Dutch Mantell was right there. We're all sitting there playing cards, and I can't remember which kid it was, but it's one of these young kids walks up to me and says, "What are you guys doing?" I says, "We're playing cards." He says, "Don't you guys got to go over your match?" I said, "No." I said, "For one, I don't have to go over this match. until they tell me what we're doing, because I'm not the boss tonight. These guys are the boss, and Tracy was in the match. He's over there asleep on a towel, and he kept waking up every 20 minutes and walking over to me and saying, "Hey, Jock, can you wake me up in about an hour?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd be glad to." He'd still wake up again and come back, and you wake me up in an hour. And it was the weirdest thing, and everyone's looking at us like we're the laziest wrestlers in the world because we didn't even plan anything. We just said, "Oh, your match is up," so we put the cards down and went out and did our thing. But I've had some good shit at AIW, man. I've had some good stuff. They put me in some good positions. They got me with Buff Bagwell, and
oh my God,
that was wild. I got a Buff Bagwell story if you want to hear it.
Shoot.
That had nothing to do with AIW.
Okay.
So my first or second year in, Buff's in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and my job was to take him around town, show him a good time. So of course we go to the gentleman's club, and Buff's in there, and everyone knows who he is, and I'm sitting in the corner being a good boy, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just relaxing, having fun." He's like, "Go get you a lap dance. It's on me." And he gives me money to go get a lap dance and buy. And I buy him a beer, but he bought me 2 lap dances at this gentleman's club. Like he didn't have don't get me wrong, he didn't have to do it. So we leave the bar, we leave the strip club, and go to a restaurant in Parkersburg called the Omelet Shop.
Okay, yeah.
So we go to the Omelet Shop. And Buff says, "Well, breakfast is on me." So I order my food, and they look at Buff, said, "What can we get you, sir?" And he said, "I would like 12 egg whites." And Lee says, "You want what?" "I would like 12 egg whites." And mind you, this place is right off the 7750, and it's called the Omelet Shop. It specializes in eggs, and they don't know how to make egg whites. And about 15 minutes later, he's doing that Buff Bagwell dance in an aisleway, and we got kicked out by the security guard because he was like, "Let me come back and cook them. I can cook them. How do you call yourself an egg place, the Omelet Shop, if you don't know how to make eggs? Egg whites." So we walked down the street to another restaurant. He bought me breakfast. So I got kicked out of the restaurant with Buff my first or second year in. So it was damn wild story.
I think
that's my Buff Bagwell story.
I think I know exactly where that Omelet Shop is. I had to double check.
Yeah, right.
I had to double check where Parker
77 and 50.
Yeah, I had to double check where Parkersburg was, and I used to be kind of in that area a lot. I used to go to Washington, West Virginia.
Washington, West Virginia. That's right across from my house now. What'd you go to Washington for?
For my job, delivering to DuPont.
DuPont. Yeah.
Yep.
You've seen that movie, haven't you?
What movie?
Dark Water?
No.
It's about that plant.
I'm going to have to watch that now.
Mark Ruffalo? Yeah. That's like what? 3 minutes from where I live now on the Ohio side.
Yeah, wow. The previous place I used to work for would deliver. It wasn't like the main part, but because actually they have a lot of warehouses, and we were delivering cardboard, or I was delivering cardboard, and there was it was part of DuPont that we would go to. Yeah, so I'd go to as soon as you said, because West Virginia has a ton of those omelet shops. And I was like,
I know.
I was like, I think I know exactly where this is. Let me double check. And I'm like, yep. Double check where Parkersburg was.
I'm sure you've been there.
Yeah.
And they used to have a restaurant called the Mountaineers where we walked to, and it was right on the same road. Mm-hmm. So yeah. But look at that movie Dark Water, because that's actually where I live. If you watch that movie, it'll piss you off. It'll piss you off. If it don't piss you off, you ain't a human being. It's wild, man.
Yeah, I even forgot you had a match with Buff Bagwell and AIW, but because that had to be J-Lit, another J-Lit story.
I think it was J-Lit, yeah.
Yeah,
Jesus.
Now I got to go back through kind of what you were saying with some young wrestler asked you if you were going to plan your match. I know that was an absolution because Dutch Mantel was at an absolution, and because actually was that the one after Biggins passed? Or was that before?
No, Biggins was still with us.
Okay, then that was the year before. So now I got to go back to that absolution, see all the younger wrestlers that are on there. That almost sounds like it would be like an AIW student, like someone who's brand new.
Yeah, they couldn't understand me. I think that's where I met Wes Barkley for the first time. It might have been him.
Oh,
but man, I love the kid. I love Wes.
Yeah,
might have been Wes.
I was actually just about to say because I had him on recently where we previewed an AIW show, and he was just about to do Greektown with you, do on that Canada tour. And I was just like, yeah. And I was like, at that point, you were supposed to be on the second to last episode. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to have Jock on, blah, blah, blah. And like, we started like getting into that kind of conversation. Cause yeah, I forgot like you guys overlapped a little bit, but yeah, like he's like now the AIW Intense champion.
Yeah, man. I love the kid, man. He's going places. He's a good kid, man. You can't, I wish I had a few more years left in the business. And I mean, I'm glad I got to wrestle him up at Greektown. So I was happy about that because I really think a lot of him. Good kid.
He was one of those people that he first started appearing on the AIW podcast, and like there was just something about just his personality that way. And then he debuted, and like he had more personality than a lot of wrestlers I've ever seen. Like when they debut, and I'm like, shit, he's just starting out. And like, look,
yeah, I mean, the personalities, man. Say you have a personality nowadays, man, it's going to take you a long, long way because a lot of guys, they don't, not that they don't, they just don't, that's not their number one thing.
Yeah.
They don't enjoy promos or anything. They just want to perform. And I mean, that's fine, but I'm thankful that God gave me a personality so I can go out there and spew my bullshit. So I ain't got to sit there and bump all day long. Like,
yeah,
I couldn't imagine. I mean, I hurt watching some of these kids work because they work so hard. I said, man, I'm glad I got a personality. Fuck.
There's like,
great kids.
There's this like one part of wrestling that I feel like a lot of, maybe I would say students, not necessarily wrestlers, like don't understand. There's like, there's a bit of like acting to it, to where you have to play a part. So you just can't be like, well, I'm so-and-so from here and I'm going to wrestle, blah, blah, blah. Like you need to do something. And that's kind of a callback to, the work that you do in old wrestling of that's like an example of like, you just can't be yourself at old. You have to put some thought into it.
Yeah, you sure do. You gotta think about like the role you're playing. And to be honest, it's not too much different than what I am personally,
Yeah.
So I don't really have to play a whole lot. I always tell people in wrestling, it's your gimmick is who you are.
Mm-hmm.
5 by a million, and I'm just lucky that I get to be myself. I get to play myself, there's not too much exaggeration with the human being me and the wrestler me. They're pretty close
to
who it is. I mean, I am a country boy. I do live in a freaking holler. I'm just, I got rocky boots, hunt, fishing, ice cold beer, what you see is what I am.
Mm-hmm.
My gym's out into it. So, I think a lot of guys in wrestling just need to do that. They don't need to try to be something that they're not. They just need to be themselves and try to amplify it by a lot because the one character that you can play and you can play well, it's you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some guys, they really struggle with that part, but if they can try to be true to themselves and what they are, it might actually help them down the road.
Yeah. The turning yourself up to 11 is definitely a key, but I think probably the problem is some people just, they don't know how to like turn that up or just turn it into where that can translate into just something that you are remembered for. Cause I think when you have people coming to shows, especially if it's their first time, like who are they going to remember more? And I mean, I've seen, my fair share of wrestlers to where it's just like, you're just being like really bland and generic and you've been doing this for a while, like, or you need to put like a little bit more thought into what you're doing.
Well, I think, and for me, it's really worked out for me because if everyone's wrestling as hard as they possibly can, and then I go out and be me, they're going to remember me.
Mm-hmm.
My personality would dictate the fact that you will remember me. They won't be able to remember how many moves I did, or it's kind of weird how wrestling went because back in the 90s, it was all personality and then not as much wrestling. Now it's more wrestling and not as much personality. There are personalities, but it's not as much as it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think you still need to cut promos. You still need to build stories and build emotion because like I tell everybody, you're not in the wrestling business. We don't sell wrestling. We sell emotion, so that's what we sell. If you just go out there and do cool stuff, and that's cool, but you're not making yourself any different than anybody else. They always told me if you're cutting a promo and everybody's yelling and everybody's screaming, you need to talk.
Mm-hmm.
So if everyone on a wrestling show is flying around the ring, I'm going to be the complete, absolute opposite. I'm going to grab a microphone. I'm going to refuse to lock up for 30 minutes, and then we're going to finally have a match. And by the time we have the match, you're excited that we did something. It's pro wrestling psychology.
Sounds like you learned that from Tracy Smothers.
I learned that from Tracy Smothers and a lot of the other guys.
Yeah.
I don't understand in wrestling. Like, I hear stuff about young guys that don't want to listen to the older guys. And I'm not saying me. I appreciate the guys that do listen to me when I give advice. Being at a wrestling promotion, having guys like Tracy Smothers, Dutch Mantell, Rob Parker, and not wanting to listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not saying you have to do what they do 100%, but man, you could take a little piece. And I've had guys tell me that, and I've actually been in wrestling locker rooms where we were talking wrestling, and a guy said, if Stone Cold Steve Austin gave me advice, I wouldn't take it. And I looked at the kid and I said, what the fuck? What do you mean? Well, he don't know what it's like to wrestle today. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to have anything to do with you. But I couldn't believe it. Stone Cold Steve Austin give you advice, you wouldn't take it. And a lot of guys like that. They don't, they won't take advice. And not all, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I could understand someone not taking advice from me because I'm going to tell you to grab a headlock and sit down. But that only works for me. So it's definitely different. It's a different world. So, but you got to adapt, and I'm not ready to adapt. I can't speed up anymore. I'm done.
I think the counterpoint I would have to that person that said that, I would be like, well, you know who took Stone Cold's advice and is a wrestler today? His name's Kevin Owens. And look where he's at now. And that his interaction with Austin has been like, he's talked about a lot where like he looked for advice. Austin gave it to him.
Yeah. Well, what do they know, right?
Like, I can kind of understand, like, well, he doesn't know, but like, there's going to be some, like, kind of like what you said, there's going to be something that he knows. Like,
man, yeah, I can't understand. Like, it's a business, right?
Yeah.
You should want to do this to make money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's end of the day, that should be the goal. Shouldn't be how many bookings you can get. I mean, if you're trying to learn, that's a good thing. But if you get to a point where you can make good money, justify what you're doing, then you should.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about making money to me. It's like, do you do anything on here where you ask guys who the greatest wrestlers of all time are?
No, it's too much of a generic question, and I try to avoid those.
Well, it tells you a lot about somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I'm on a road trip with a bunch of young guys, right?
Yeah.
I've got to know who their favorite wrestler of all time is. I need to know who it is because that'll tell me a lot about the kind of wrestler that you want to be.
Yeah.
Like me, I get a lot of hell for this, but my favorite wrestler of all time, I'm sure people know, it's Hulk Hogan.
Yes.
He's the reason I'm in the wrestling business. To me, he is arguably one of the 5 or 6 guys that you can say is the greatest pro wrestler of all time.
Mm-hmm.
There's like 5 or 6 guys that you can put in this conversation that I will accept. Like, don't tell me someone's a better wrestler than Hogan because he wrestles better than Hogan.
Mm-hmm.
These guys, Hogan's better than these guys because Hogan draws more money than they do. So I get guys that'll say people, well, I like this guy because, man, he's such a good technician. And it just tells you a lot about who the wrestler is, what you're going to deal with.
Yeah.
And that's a very important question because when they say who's your favorite wrestler, I say Hulk Hogan, they go, oh, and so they think that we're not going to do nothing, but Hulk Hogan did nothing and drew millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Austin was a really great wrestler in WCW. He went to WWF, started stomping and punching and flipping people off, did less and made money.
Yeah.
Like, so that tells me a lot about what they are. Like, sometimes I get answers and I just dread what I'm going to deal with that night. I'm like, oh Lord, this guy's going to want to blow me up and kill me and run me wild. But if you do that sometime, because that really tells you a lot about the wrestler,
Yeah.
is who their favorite wrestler is. Like, I know I'm going to have a night off if someone tells me their favorite wrestler is the Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valiant. I'm like, thank God. I got a night off. Praise God, you know?
It's funny because I think as a fan, like, I look at that question differently. And I mean, you kind of like opened my eyes to something, because for me, like, I think of like just like what I enjoyed the most, not necessarily what I want to be. But as far as what even I've learned listening to like the IW podcast or just some of those wrestlers, to where they're encouraged to like, well, what do you want to be like? Well, go watch this. And sometimes like it might be against like who your favorites are. Like for me, like my favorites were Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels. But
yeah,
do I have love for other ones, like other wrestlers? Like you mentioned Hulk Hogan. Like Terry Bollea might be a big piece of shit, but what Hulk Hogan did in the ring and all that kind of stuff, like you can't see it. I have 3 wrestling buddies by my wall, and it's Hogan, Warrior, and Savage. And like I grew up right at the tail end of Hulkamania. And I still have that kind of little bit of a fondness for all that, but I can recognize that, like, okay, was he the most, quote, technical? No. But conversation I think I did have with a wrestler, but it was like on TikTok, where it was just like, yeah, Hogan isn't technical, but what did he do? He made money. That's what being a wrestler is. Like there's more than just wrestling. There's wrestlers out there who are really good at, quote, wrestling. Can't cut a promo to save their life.
Yeah, man. It's about money.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when I hear promoters running shows and they don't care about making money, like it makes you not want to work for them. Like I'm just like, man, you should be wanting to make money because I'm going to make more money. Like, this is my hobby. It's not a hobby. It's profession. Like I think we should all treat it like a profession. Like everybody, even wrestlers. When I find out wrestlers get paid that wrestle for free, I blows my mind because they're actually undercutting people that deserve to be paid.
Yeah. I mean, that's,
and promoters that don't do that are nobody worth messing with. It's undercutting.
I mean, hearing some of the horror stories I've heard, even one recently where a company in Indiana was kind of thrown under the bus because the dude paid a wrestler with Bible verses. Like, dude, seriously, what the fuck?
Well, I know the guy that promoter, and he always paid me with a bunch of money. So I'm gonna call it. I may call bullshit because I've never seen him pay anybody, or what agreement did they have? Granted, he should be paying people. It could have been a mistake, but I may call bullshit on that. There's a lot of wrestlers that don't like it because it is a church show. And they're already mad because they got to follow a certain protocol at the church show. I mean, you're at a church show, you should follow. You should be respectful. And he's never mistreated. So I'll leave it at that. You can cut that, or you can keep that in if you want.
Well, I'll keep it in. Like, I mean, it's throwing out your side. I've heard the other wrestler's side, and I just think my biggest thing is, according to the wrestler, that there was an agreement in place, and he did get an envelope. Like, maybe it was a one-time thing, or maybe it was an accident. I could see that aspect of it, but nonetheless, like, there are, at least I know other companies too, that, do the underpay thing. Maybe I've always thought, just from a fan side, like maybe if you were within your first year after while training type thing, I guess okay. But there's a certain point where it's just like, if you're working for free, what are you doing?
Yeah. I'll just say that guy, he's done nothing but pay me.
Yeah.
Like more than I've asked. So he was always a rock solid guy. And I ain't going to, I may not say bullshit, but I mean, it could have been an accident. If they got something, I granted that he would put a Bible verse in my envelope with my money, and it didn't bother me. Either read it or don't read it, It is a church show. You can't take that booking and you can't be surprised when you get that.
I mean, for me, as long as there was money in it, then I don't think it's a big deal if they threw a Bible verse in.
Yeah. You just can't be surprised. You work for a church show, You can't be mad when they expect you to do church stuff.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I would take my jacket off that said I was the king of the one night stand. I would take it off. I wouldn't wear it there and just be respectful. Like, do I go to church? No, but I want to be as respectful as I possibly can.
Yeah.
So it just is what it is. So I'm sure he took care of them and paid them after the fact, or I hope someone checked their envelope before they left the building. So if someone hears this, they're going to be mad. I don't really give a shit because I'm done. I ain't going to deal with anybody's bullshit.
Yeah.
And if they would have had a problem, they'll just call me out on Twitter. No one ever calls me out in person. If you got an issue, call me out. They never call you out in person. They always call you out on Twitter. So when they're mad at you, that's how this world goes.
Yeah. I think I might be like halfway guilty of that sometimes, but like sometimes if I have an issue, like I might not call someone out on Twitter. I might send a private message at least. Cause then it's like, okay, let's talk about this. If there's some sort of issue or something like that. Yeah.
Now, if you don't see anybody, like if I have a chance to see you, I ain't going to fight you. I mean, good grief. Yeah. I'll go up and I'll tell you, we don't have to get along to work together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of guys I don't like that I work with. I mean, you got to be professional about it. Some people don't take that aspect of it. So, yeah, but me being in wrestling, like if someone's got a problem with me, I'm an open book. Come and tell me. Don't sit around and beat around the bush.
Mm-hmm.
Just hate it. Like I'll never do a vague Facebook post. Like I know guys that'll get online and they'll put a vague Facebook post, and you know who it's about. Just come out and say it if you're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't hide it. Don't try to deny it. Just come out and say it. But that's the old man in me about calling people out on Twitter. No, yeah, if someone's a pervert or something like this, pedophile, yeah, call them out quick as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And social media is one, but a personal beef, nah, that's a personal thing. It should be face to face or at least a telephone call.
Mm-hmm.
If you got their number, that's my take.
I even think it could be private messages too, just something that's personal between two people, because like that could help hash it out. The fact that like there's no audience, it's just you two.
Sure. Well, the thing that makes me nervous about like when you do a private message with somebody,
mm-hmm.
they'll screenshot it.
True.
And put it out there for the world. If you just use your own words, it's between you and them. And it's not like you want nothing to hide. It's just, it's nice to keep things private.
Mm-hmm.
I think, granted now personal issues do work well in wrestling nowadays, but
I mean, I feel like it's more than just nowadays. Which granted it's more recent, but like look at Matt Hardy and Edge when they went through like a very public thing, and like that feud was great.
I consider them the old school. I'm talking like 2013 on or 15 and on.
Yeah,
that generation was. You got to think Matt Hardy and Edge were around with these big brute dudes, so they had to be. You were in a hornet's nest. You were in a snake pit.
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of killers. I'm not saying guys today ain't tough, but I'm just saying it was just a different world back then. Like, especially when I came up, like I had these old, big, mean, grizzled dents that could hook you. And, it helped, made you grow up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And it sure did me. I think that's why when I branched out and started wrestling other places, I was so confident with what I was doing because like, man, it ain't gonna get no worse than that, But yeah, it's definitely a different world. But that Matt Hardy Edge thing, boy, that's as real as it gets there.
Yeah, and that's like what to me one of the most memorable real life scenarios being put on screen, and it just works so well.
Yeah, man, it's all about making some money.
Yeah, because like kind of like what you were saying, like they both knew how much money was involved in all that. They were able to put aside their differences to work together. They both definitely made hell of money off of that shit, and probably helped out both their careers.
It's all about making if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely a different place, different world.
Yeah, it's kind of like switching topics a little bit, but it's kind of like how I feel with a lot of, I'm not going to necessarily name names, but like while come across independent wrestlers that they seem to have no desire to get out from what they're doing, like actually like expand, like, I'm fine with doing this and that. But it's like, if you got an actual dream of doing something, understand like what you're doing ain't it. Like no one's signing you after 2 matches a month. Like if you,
Yeah. It's funny. I had a conversation with Matt Justice at IWC. What was it? Maybe a month or 2 ago. We were just kind of, shooting the shit. And, wrestling's real hard, as we all know. It's a hard business to be in. But we were saying, I said, man, have you ever remembered the shittiest guy on the shitty show? And he was married, had like 4 or 5 kids, and we're out here sweating, grunting, dying of him because he had zero expectations of what he wanted to do. Like that was his WrestleMania. Mm-hmm. That was his WrestleMania, was doing a match every whatever, We're saying, man, you know what I'm talking about too, probably. Yeah. You can just see the guy and think, man, how happy is he? And he's awful. He's just proud to be that guy.
I do want to differentiate from like when it's someone who's older, and I say older as in like, let's say late 30s, early 40s and up. But when but when it's someone who's like young, like they're in their early 20s, they've been wrestling like a couple years. And I just look at it from the outside perspective of like, if I was in your position, I would want to get better. I would want to put myself out there. But are you really happy with like the 2 bookings a month or 1 booking a month you might get? I mean, if you are, great, but don't tell me you have ambitions to, be at to work WrestleMania one day. Cause like, for me, ain't no way in hell that works. Like you have to work to get to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially I started when I was 26. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine these guys 18, 19 years old and they just have no drive in them. Mm-hmm. It is what it is. I do feel like when you're that young, it's like you're wasting your time. And you're right. But then there are some that just look at it where it's not a financial thing. And I still believe that they should ask for pay, even if it's $15. I mean, you are doing a job. You are doing service.
Yeah.
For somebody, You
drove to the venue. Gas isn't free. Like you need compensated something, and you definitely need more than potentially what gas cost you.
And you are undercutting people by doing it free. So you should get something, or don't waste your time. Because I know guys that are just happy to work for free, and it blows my mind. We're all over West. And promoters just use guys because they don't have to pay nobody.
Yeah.
It does blow your mind, doesn't it?
I mean, when I see cards in my own area where I don't recognize like a single person on the card, I'm like, oh, this isn't necessarily a place I want to go to because of like some stuff like that.
Yeah, I can imagine, man. I mean, you got to be able to pique someone's interest, or it ain't going to do you any good. I see it everywhere. I mean, work for places where they just got no drive. It's almost like they want to book shows to just hang out with people, be their friends and stuff. So, but I've got to the point, thank God, I could be picky, for the most part for what I wanted to do. A lot of guys, I just can't imagine not getting compensation, like leaving my family and not getting compensation. That's insane, especially when you get like promoters and they're like, well, the house was light. Well, that's not my problem.
Yeah.
Not my problem. I'm sorry that, you shake my hand and you say, this is what you're going to get. I'm not getting one penny less. I can't set that standard. And guys will be like, oh, that's okay, man. You don't have to pay me. It's like, yeah, why don't you just undercut people more? That's what they're doing. They're undercutting everybody.
Yeah, I can almost think maybe if it was once in a while, but I kind of look at it as like you asked me to work this show. I told you my rate. You agreed on it. And then after that, like you could have sold 1 ticket. That's not my fault. Like you agreed. Like it wasn't like, well, you know, if this many people show up, you can pay me this, but if many people show up, you can pay me this. Like, no, it's, you agree to that.
Now, if I agreed to the house, yeah, sure. It's whatever the agreement is. Now, I have done some benefit shows for free, but you can only do so many of those, because if you do more than what you do, then people are going to think that they can undercut you a little bit, and you just can't let them do that. Like, I don't reach out. I stopped reaching out to promoters like 8-9 years ago for bookings, because the moment I reach out to them, it looks like I'm trying to get employment with them, so they can kind of start me off low. If they reach out to me, then I can give you my flat fee. I dictate how much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it seems when a lot of guys will reach out. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
If you do it so much, it sounds like you're desperate. And then these promoters, if you're wanting $100, they'll say, well, I'll give you 50 because you called me.
Mm-hmm.
But if they call me and you say, I can only give you 100, well, I want 150. Then you got a little bit of more room. You got more leverage.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of how I feel. You got a little bit more leverage, and I can dictate what I'm getting and what not.
And I would think too, just learning from that, because that's nothing I ever really thought about before. But yeah, like, put yourself out there. But if you create your own, you know, brand, whether you want to say it was brand or personality or whatever it is, so like you'll then have people want to come to you, then you don't need to be putting out those messages, or at least not nearly as much, because people are going to see you other places and go, I want him here too.
Yeah. I mean, we got, and the girls are the best at this. The girls protect themselves so much.
Yeah.
Like, they really do. Guys, if it's free, you're wrestling for free. You get paid for work.
Yeah.
So a lot of guys, I mean, I see it all the time. Everyone trying to undercut somebody just so they can play wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they're doing. They're playing wrestler, and they're happy to do it.
Yeah, I figured the women have like the advantage because there's a lot less of them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they have to stand up for each other. They got to take care of each other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, geez, if they don't, who will? Because I know the guys ain't going to take care of them. These guys are worried about whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
And the guys should actually be more concerned about taking care of, we should all take care of each other, for one.
Yeah.
You know, but it's just, this will get me ripping and roaring, and I'll be cussing and swearing and raising heck. And my daughter just walked in the house, so this is going to get more PG now. So I can't be swearing.
Well, let's change the subject to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Oh, boy.
God, fuck them.
We talking about the 6-time Super Bowl champion Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yes, the 6-time Super Bowl champion Pittsburgh Steelers.
You know, how many, and I don't want to hear about the NFL championships that they won back in the 50s,
Okay, NFL.
I mean,
this is what I go by. NFL championships matter because you're not going to just negate decades of like all these championships. Now, there's a lot of Browns fans that'll be like, "Oh, we got 8." I think they try to say 8 championships, and I'm like, no. The AAFC championships do not count. Did the Browns win them? Yes. But I'm not comparing them to the NFL championships. That, to me, that you're talking about a money in a different currency that is no longer around. That money is worthless. The NFL championships at least matter.
I mean, I will count it like a division title. I'll count it like that. They had 4 teams. It's just like I think Babe Ruth's really influential as a baseball player, but he didn't play against any Dominican or African American players, so it's kind of hard for me to say he's the greatest. He's probably the most influential in the history of the game because he made it to the heights to where they were able to go and run with it. But yeah, no. Like 50s, 60s, once you start getting the 70s and 80s, and then we can have that talk.
Oh, we start with the 70s because that's when the Steelers were something, because there were decades that they were literally like one of the worst teams in the entire NFL.
Did you know that the NFL, the owner, the guy that owned the NFL, or the commissioner of the NFL, not the owner, he wanted to call the Steelers America's team, and they went to Art Rooney Sr. and said, "We would like to call you America's team." And Art Rooney said, no, thank you. We're not America's team. We're Pittsburgh's team. Yes. So technically the Steelers are America's team. So, and you can't dispute that because you go to any away game where the Steelers are playing and there's usually more Steeler fans there than a lot of the home teams, not the Browns. The Browns fans, are loyal, and it's kind of their fault that the Browns suck. And hear me out on this, and you can tell me pee off here. Okay, you guys are so loyal. You guys sell out the stadium every game almost. Am I right?
Yeah. Like I ironically enough, I was listening to the radio and they were talking about this article of like the most loyal fan bases, and they literally had Cleveland at 31, and they didn't even list all 32 teams because for some reason they left off Washington. But it's kind of like, yeah, that's bullshit, because when this team was horrible, like the games were still like a thing to go to.
So if you guys would boycott, if they're putting a bad product on the field, which I don't think their product is bad now, I just think they're in a rough division.
Yeah.
If them crappy products that they put out, quit being loyal and put money in this. Why would the rich guy change anything if he's still making money? He's still making money.
Yeah.
If you put heat on him, if you're not selling out, then you better get you a product on there that'll fill the stadium. Like I'll guarantee 150%. If the Steelers started sucking bad for 10 years, their attendance would drop. It would drop, and it would force the Rooney family to rethink what they're doing. And for one, they wouldn't wait that long to suck.
Oh, yeah.
They'd have a bad year, and why try? Why try? If you're going to sell out, why?
But my counterpoint is, number one, if they win, they do make more money, and they also can be like, oh yeah, we're raising season ticket prices. We're raising ticket prices. We're raising this. We're raising that. But they need to be good. So is it a little bit easier for them right now? Yes. But make them a championship team, I could only imagine like how expensive things would be. Not to an outrageous price, but it's like, oh, we're now like the thing to be. Well, you've always wanted it. Well, now you got to pay for it.
I think the stadium would blow up. I think the city of Cleveland would blow up if they ever won a Super Bowl. I think it would be the end of the city of Cleveland. I think it would implode from within, losing their minds at least for a championship. And then as soon as LeBron left, they turned their back on him.
That is mixed between fans. Like I don't know if you can see it. I got my LeBron jersey behind me. So I
love LeBron James.
When he left,
I love LeBron.
When he left the first time, I was bitter. When he came back, I was like, okay, let's see how this goes. And when we won the championship, I was like, okay, I have no ill will towards him. I actually do want a Lakers LeBron jersey. But going back to, there's a lot of stuff that you said that like I'd love to like get into. Number one, I won't debate you or disagree with you on the whole America's team thing. I've said for a long time, since like especially when I was over the road and everything, that the Pittsburgh Steelers are the most loved but also the most hated franchise in the NFL.
I would argue to the point that I think the Cowboys are more hated.
It's different. People hate the Cowboys because like either A, because of the 90s run, or B, the fan or friends that everybody has that are nostalgic because of that 90s run and never shut up about it. Steelers are hated for different reasons from different franchises. And hated, I always say too, it's a sports hate. It's not like, you want to see these people die, but it's just like the rivalry.
I don't know. I've been to some NFL games where people would rather people die, and they're like, NFL games. I don't want to take my daughter to an NFL game because of how stupid people act.
Oh God, that's a whole thing in its own. Like I have like my own rules for games, and the number one thing is like for I'll just say for the Browns, you should only wear a jersey or clothing of one of the teams playing. Don't show up to a Browns Cardinals game in a Steelers jersey because you are an asshole. But if it is a Browns Steelers game, I will not disrespect Steelers fans. Could there be some like shit talk, playful stuff? Yes, but it won't be anything that is over the top and could be taken as like a death threat. Like, no, like we're both here enjoying this game. Just like I've had people say like, oh, I'm afraid to go to a Steelers game and my Brown stuff. I'm like, if the Browns are playing, I'll go, because like we're both there to watch the game.
Well, let's agree on this.
Mm-hmm.
The city of Pittsburgh and the city of Cleveland, they're the same type of people.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, they're blue collar, one's a steel mill town. They're both industrial towns. I mean, it's a blue collar town. They're the same people. They just like different teams. Yeah. That's really it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not like Dallas and Pittsburgh hating each other. I mean, because Dallas is Texas and,
yeah.
I mean, just as a big metropolis like New York Jets, these are two blue collar towns that would be small market teams in baseball, but the NFL makes it to where they're all big.
Yeah.
But they're the same type of people. They both love football, except one just happened to be more successful, no big deal.
Well, the fun thing, you mentioned about the Rooney family, that, it was at one point it was quoted back when the Steelers were horrible and the Browns were good, that, what was it, Art Rooney? Like he really wanted to be like the Browns. He modeled like certain things after how they were doing things. Like he idolized them. And then as like things happen throughout time, like literally like they changed places to where the Browns became that type of franchise. And the Steelers obviously, ultra successful. Like literally everything they've done since the 70s, it's really hard to knock because, they've only had fucking, you guys got like 3 coaches?
Yeah, you had Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and Mike Tomlin since 1969. Incredible.
Yeah, 3. Like the Browns have had that in a season. Like,
yeah, it's the blueprint, man. It's the blueprint about how to be successful. Almost 50 years. Mm-hmm. Maybe a handful. I mean, bad. I don't think they've been terrible, but I think that I think they're 1-15 and 69, and then they got better after that. But that was Chuck Noll's first year, and that was that draft class. We had Mean Joe, and then Terry Bradshaw came a year after or something, and they started drafting all the Steel Curtain, and you guys could have took Jack Lambert from Manaway,
Crestwood,
Ohio. Yep. I said that correctly.
No. I was saying the school, Crestwood.
Oh, yeah, crap. But people give you crap when you call it Mantua. Manaway.
Yeah, Manaway. Yeah, I grew up in literally the same, what do we want to call it? The same sports conference. We were at that time, we were the PCL. Yeah,
and you're in Jack Lambert Stadium up there.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. And the Browns could have drafted him. They should have. And he took it personal when they didn't draft him. And then he just wouldn't become an absolute menace 2 times a year. But that's how it is. Like, can you imagine, like the Browns passed on Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
And I mean, he went on to become a Hall of Fame quarterback. Well, he's got a great podcast too, by the way. I know you're a Browns fan, but it's pretty good. I actually like listening to it because he had Bill Cowher on there. He had Mike T on there.
I'll openly say that I don't respect Ben Roethlisberger that much, but here's what I want to say, because I don't. It's not because he's a Steelers fan. Steeler. There's a lot of like things he's done in his career that I thought were stupid.
Oh yeah,
and I'm not even talking off the field stuff. I'm just talking about bad decisions. Like there was one year, I think it was like the beginning of training camp. He was being interviewed, and he was like, "Yeah, I've had like an issues with my shoulder all off season, but I didn't do anything about it." And then like literally like he got injured halfway through the season. It's just like, yeah, dude, that's on you. But yeah. I will say this. There's one Pittsburgh Steeler that if I were to meet, I would shake his hand and tell him how much I respect him.
Hines Ward, right?
No, actually, I do not like Hines Ward either. Can you actually guess? I will say this. He is recent, as in he's played within the last decade. I'll say I think he's in the Hall. Is he in the Hall of Fame? I can't.
He won't be in.
No.
He lost his mind.
No. The one that I'm thinking. I can't remember if he's in or not right now.
Keith Miller.
No. Troy Polamalu.
All right, I was getting ready to go there, but I can't believe. I mean, how could you miss that dude? And screw Ed Reed. Troy's 10 times better than him. I don't care what anybody. Ravens fans are stupid. But
Troy Polamalu on the field was amazing, and then a lot of stuff I've heard off the field also amazing. His Head and Shoulders commercials fucking hilarious. Like
best.
Like I don't think I've ever heard a bad word said about Troy Polamalu.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, so he's one dude that I would love to like. Because he might not be in the Hall of Fame. Like, if I were to run into him in Canton...
He's in.
He's in. Okay. Some of these classes I've just blanked on who goes in and who doesn't. But I actually had a friend who bumped into Bettis right after he got into the Hall of Fame because he actually lives in Canton. And, like, I think it was like he just went to a Denny's or Bob Evans or something, like ran into him
There's a bus.
Yeah, ran him into the Monday afterwards. And even like he's a Browns fan, and like he, gave him, some respect of like, how much respect he has for him. And he's another one. Like I remember when it took him like years to get in the Hall of Fame, I'm like, listen, I'm a Browns fan, but that's bullshit. 1 year, okay. But you haven't, I think they might have done like 3 years. He should have been in first or second.
Let me ask you this. Do you put Big Ben in? First ballot?
Okay, here we're gonna talk some real shit now. Like he's got a lot of reasons to go in, but with what we've seen with the particular quarterback choice in Cleveland, does those parts of Ben Roethlisberger's past get brought back up? I'm on the borderline because I could see people just being like forgetting it, and then I could see people just this is a guy that did this and that. Why would you honor him?
Well, the NFL, man, they've got a lot of crappy people in their Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that's true.
They still got a lot. I mean, the NFL got a lot of horrible people.
Yes.
LT's still in there for what he got convicted of. OJ.
Hey, I was about to say, yeah, OJ shit. Yeah.
But I could sit and talk football all day. Now, I need a question to ask you. This will tell me a lot about you. Who's the greatest basketball player of all time?
Greatest or my favorite?
It's got to be who do you think the best?
I'm biased. I do say LeBron.
All right. Now, I love LeBron, and I was leading the charge on him being the greatest of all time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until the last couple of years with the Lakers.
Mm-hmm.
That would have never happened with Michael in his prime.
Mm-hmm.
Like, LeBron's the most complete player of all time, but man, Michael Jordan just had that dog inside of him, and you get people that try to tell me that the guys in the 80s and 90s watch basketball today and how it's played. It's like Dennis Rodman saying that Larry Bird wouldn't be any good today. I'm like, we just saw what Larry Bird would do with Jokic. And Larry Bird had a little bit more dog in him than Jokic did.
Yeah.
Larry Bird had dog in him. He was a dog. I enjoy basketball, but I hate the game today. I hate let's dribble down and fire it up from half court. I hate it. I hate what Steph Curry did to basketball.
Yeah.
Oh, but he's influential.
Yeah. I mean, for me,
go to high school basketball games, people firing up 40-footers.
It goes for me like kind of like I think we were talking about baseball before we started recording, where it's just like basketball is too long, baseball is too long. And with baseball too, like baseball is my first love. That's the first sport I started watching and started following. But I don't get into it as much as I do NFL.
Yeah.
And my favorite my favorite basketball player of all time is Shaq. Love Shaq.
I mean, yeah. Like when I'm done wrestling, they're like, what do you want to do, besides, with your family? And I said, I want to do TikToks where I talk about my favorite things that I've never got to talk about. Like, who do I think the greatest, who do I think the top 5 greatest wrestlers are, the top 5 greatest football players, the top 5 greatest quarterbacks, or, rock bands. What bands do I think suck?
Mm.
What wrestlers do I think suck? And I'll probably never go there because I have too much respect for anybody that's done this to go there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think I may do that because I love lists. And you want to talk about, like, I get on TikTok and I watch these guys. They say, who the greatest third baseman of all time is. And I'll fight people when I say it's George Brett. He's my favorite athlete in the history of anything. And I'm a Reds fan.
Yeah.
And I love George Brett. But I get so mad at people because I love lists. Greatest football teams of all time. They're my favorite thing. My top 5 favorite movies of all time.
What?
You know, I've never been asked that, but I would always like to do that and talk about it. You know?
Yeah.
I just think that would be fun.
Well, here's the thing with TikTok. And like, I'm on there. I got a decent following, and I've watched wrestlers get on there. The ones that really drum up a following are the ones that step outside of the wrestling stuff. Of like, well, here's a clip of this. Here's this, where literally like 2 of the most followed wrestlers that I could think of that are like independent wrestlers, they're honestly, and there's no shot towards them, they're complete no names, but they've managed to do other things that made people go, oh, I'm going to follow this guy. Or like, oh, I like what he's doing. Like, one is he does more figure related things, and another one, I think he does more comedy related things. And I've watched other wrestlers. There's one out in New Jersey, Shay McCoy, like she started getting into more like music stuff. Like, you can put your wrestling stuff on there, but if you show your real personality, people seem to love it. And you'll get in people that'll follow you and like, oh shit, you're a wrestler? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. This one guy gets on there and he said, these are my top 5 favorite movies that I saw this year.
Mm-hmm.
His favorite movies that I saw this year. But you want to talk about a wrestler who I think has done a really good job of getting his name out of there. And I mean, usually wouldn't like a guy like him, but I really get a kick out of what he does is Jack Vaughn.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people that get pissed off about what he does, and being an old school guy, I hate the idea that the business get put out there, but what am I talking about? They've been put out there for the last 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
We know what it is, and I get a kick out of what he does. So I really enjoy what he does, and he's gotten bookings out of it.
Yeah.
I think if you're a wrestling promotion that does, like, we'll just say the super indie style, why don't you book him in there and let him be a heel? He's automatically a heel with that kind of crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And all he's got to do is come out and make fun of these guys, and it would work. I think anybody should book that guy. I think he's great.
Yeah. But he's another he's another one. I don't want to say that he stepped outside of like wrestler, but he made it to where people had a reason to watch. Not like, well, here's this clip of a match. Like, you need something other than your wrestling to draw people in. This isn't Twitter. This isn't Instagram, to where you want to highlight that stuff. TikTok, I've learned, like, literally, like, for me, like, I have 20,000 followers. But what really drum up my following, because like I do a lot of wrestling related stuff, talk about that and some football stuff. Literally, like, the 2 most watched videos I have, like, I just went off that path and did like some other things. One, I answered a question of like, would you work a graveyard like from this time to this time, blah 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 blah. And another one was a guy said like, I have every Funko Pop, and I pulled out one that I had that I'm pretty sure he didn't have. Boom, like both, like one is over 1 million and one is close to 1 million views.
Yeah, that stuff seems to work out pretty good. I mean, people want to know real life stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of nice to let people in to know who you are.
Yeah. Or just finding a way to like take your personality and like put it out there for people to see that they might not see in the wrestling ring or your promos, or just something. Because if we want to see those videos, those clips, those are on other social media. All right, let's start to wrap this show up, and let's get into the Fave 5 questions.
Hey, this is Booker T, 5-time champ, and this is the Fave 5 questions. Now, can you dig it?
All right, this one should be interesting with you, because I mean, I got a ton. I got to figure out which ones work best for you. That's a staple. I love it. Bacon or sausage?
What kind of sausage?
It just,
Links or patties?
Well, that's actually, I have secondary questions for those, to where if people say bacon, I ask them how they like it cooked, and then sausage, whether it's link or patty. Just kind of in
I
general.
like sausage.
Okay.
I like sausage links from Bob Evans, which is a southeastern Ohio staple.
Who was it? Yeah, for a J-Lit weekend, you had. Oh, never mind. I'm not going to mention him right now. You and a particular wrestler had your picture taken at a J-Lit Bob Evans weekend. And that guy might have gotten into some trouble recently, so I'm not necessarily going to mention his name.
Oh, yeah. Remember that. Right next to the hotel. Yeah.
A hotel
It was us.
A hotel that's no longer there.
I couldn't tell you, man. There's a lot of stuff in Cleveland ain't there no more.
Question number 2. Favorite flavor of Pop-Tarts?
Man, I like strawberry. The one with the... I can't think of it right now. We just had it here at the house.
Linda. Hold on, Linda's here. Hang on, Linda. What was that Oreo? What was that Pop-Tart we got? Cookies and cream. I like it. Yes.
I haven't had that.
Cookies and cream.
I think I haven't had that one in a while. Now I kind of want it.
Yeah, because that's one of my road snacks. It's Pop-Tarts.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they don't have cookies and cream, I get strawberry. I like to, you know how they got the gas station. I'll just grab one and that'll be my like snack.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's legitimately like a road snack for me.
I'm not huge on strawberry because I had it too much as a kid. Like my aunt that I had growing up, she always had strawberry Pop-Tarts in the pantry, and I just can't eat them nowadays. But for me, it's s'mores.
Yeah, I love s'mores. Well, my backyard is a swamp now,
mm-hmm.
and I got a fire pit down at the bottom of the, and I got to wait till like August or September to even be able to do fires because when it gets the flat part where it slopes, we usually do s'mores a lot of time, but we can't go down there until a certain point because it's just a swamp.
Yeah.
So, and we like s'mores, but cookies and cream, baby, I would say.
Another good one that I haven't had in a little while, they have like an Eggo waffle one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm a sucker for trying anything like as soon as it comes out. So they're like, oh, there's this new flavor. And I'm like, all right, I got to try it. That one was,
why not?
That one was surprisingly good.
We had the brown sugar one here too, and I thought it was okay.
I'm not a fan.
It was all right.
To me, that was always the boring Pop-Tart.
Still a boring Pop-Tart, still a Pop-Tart.
That's almost like what they say about pizza.
I mean, Pop-Tart's a Pop-Tart.
So when people say like, even a bad pizza's, still pizza or it's good pizza, and I'm like,
I'm with you. I've had some awful pizza.
I'm always like, did you ever have Chuck E. Cheese pizza? That's like, yeah, that is horrible.
Yeah, it's a pretty rough one. Yeah.
All right, question number 3: favorite game show. There's a lot of good ones too.
When I was a kid, a little boy down southeastern Ohio in Nelsonville, I would sit up every night and watch Wheel of Fortune. Passe Jack and Vanna White came and did a Wheel of Fortune in my hometown. I actually have pictures. So Wheel of Fortune, man, Passe Jack, he's quitting this year. So yeah, I'm gonna say Wheel of Fortune. Jeopardy being a close second.
There's something about that 1-2 punch is like so nostalgic.
Yeah.
And
then Price is Right's right in there too. So watching the Price is Right, but I'm still gonna say Wheel of Fortune.
When I was in kindergarten, by the time I came home, because it was like half day and I did mornings, like right when I got home, Price is Right had like kind of like just started, like for the day, not necessarily for its run, but I had like so many memories coming home, eating lunch, and just watching Price is Right.
Man,
one game show that I love right now, and it's amazing like how good it's become, is Family Feud.
Well, Steve Harvey, he's great.
Yeah, like
great.
I just watched a documentary last night where they kind of like were talking about, it was just like one you find on YouTube, where the guy was talking about like where it went from when it was canceled, when Richard Dawson came back, and then like up until today and like everything it went through. And I'm willing to debate with people that Steve Harvey is a better host than Richard Dawson. Richard Dawson's great, but Steve Harvey took it to another level.
He's entertaining, man.
Mm-hmm.
He got the personality to get it over.
And
they
brought up a point on the documentary. I'm like, oh, I never thought about it like this. Cause like, I love that when you give a bad answer, Steve sometimes will kind of like let you know. And supposedly they didn't want him to do that, but it was like, this is what the viewers at home are doing. I'm just giving like that a voice. Like, it doesn't have to be like this. Like, we have to be like, oh, good answer. When like, yeah, that we know that that's a bad one.
Yep. But when it's a funny one, he pops and sells it too.
Yeah. And him being a comedian, he can just improv so well on a lot of that stuff. He's a
West Virginia Cleveland guy.
Oh yeah. Question number 4. I really enjoy this one. It's a little different. What deodorant do you use?
Degree.
Really?
Yeah. I have to use the white, whatever the hell they call that. I have to use it because I break out when I use blue clear one. When I break out, I'm allergic to it. So I've got to use Degree. And I have to shave my armpits so I don't get all the hair stuck up in it. But it works better that way. So I use Degree. The one I get, the Dollar General. That's where I get my cologne, which is Brute. You know.
Yeah, I'm more of a Old Spice fan. I've most of my deodorant using life, because I don't want to say my whole life, but you know, since I've been using deodorant, it's been mostly Old Spice.
Yeah, that's the kind my dad used, but I'm allergic to all that. Like, I love the aftershave.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to wear it and it broke me out. Like, you know, just had a big reaction to it. So I can't ever wear it. And I love Old Spice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it breaks my heart, but I'm a Degree guy.
All right. Question number 5. Wings, bone in or out?
In. What kind of question is that? What kind of guy doesn't eat the bone in? Do you want to get his hands dirty? Bone in, parm garlic with ranch, a shit ton of ranch.
I don't think I've ever used ranch on anything other than like a buffalo or mild.
Just grip it and rip it, boy.
Yeah.
Beat that bone down, suck that meat off. That's how you do it.
I love me a good just barbecue bone in.
Yeah.
But
barbecue bone in? Oh my God. That's how you get better flavor that way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not really a boneless wing person, but I'm just saying, like, in general, like, it's my pick is bone in and barbecue. The only thing though, like, barbecue differs from place to place. So what I will use as like a litmus test is some places like buffalo or mild wing, because you can't fuck that up, or you can't make it that much different. Like, it's just mild.
Sometimes I'll get a mild, half parm garlic. But yeah, I would say so. Yeah, bone in, without a doubt.
All right, question number 6 that I tailored to my guess, and I think this is perfect because you kind of mentioned it. Give me your top 5 movies of all time.
Oh my gosh! All right, so I'm going to start number 5. Armageddon.
Okay.
Number 4, The Godfather 2. 3, Godfather 1.
Okay.
I'm a mob movie fanatic. Movie number 2, White Men Can't Jump.
Okay.
I base my entire career off of talking trash.
Okay.
So, love it. I'm a trash talker. You know it.
Yeah.
I like to talk trash. But my favorite movie of all time is when I was little. It goes back to when I was a kid, and I watch it every time it's on. This is going to kill my street cred. But Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Okay.
Gene Wilder. No Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp ruined it. He made Willy Wonka look a little perverted, and it upset me. Like, it upset me like you wouldn't believe. Gene Wilder is the only man that should ever have played Willy Wonka. And I hear they're doing a movie that's before, like a prequel, like
yes.
A coming to age Willy Wonka. And they better not mess that up, or I'll find some bun, I'll punch him right in the face. Because how do you get Johnny Depp to do that one compared to like how cool Gene Wilder was? Gene Wilder is and was the man. So yeah, that's my top 5 favorite movies.
If I would have known that, I would have asked you, because I have a question on the list of who's a worse human being, Grandpa Joe or Jenny from Forrest Gump?
Wow.
Because
Jenny had sex with him and she had AIDS, and she kept leading him on, and he was special needs. She had sex with special needs Uncle Joe was just lazy, so I'd say Jenny.
Yeah.
Like Forrest Gump did all these great things, but he's special needs, and she had sex with him. That's what it was. But Grandpa Joe, I saw a TikTok where this woman saw Uncle Joe like licking the wallpaper,
Mm-hmm.
and she showed herself getting wound up about it. She said, "There's something about Uncle Joe licking that wallpaper that gets me wound up," and it just made me laugh. And they just kept showing him licking it. I'm just like, that's great. So yeah, I'm saying Jenny because
My only issue with Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is there's this one part that to me is like the most boringest part of the movie. And if they did not have it in it, it wouldn't matter. And that would be Cheer Up, Charlie. Like that is like, I look at that movie in two parts, everything before it and everything after it. Like the whole part, the whole part in the factory is great.
You had a white guy sing Sammy Davis Jr. part. You know,
just
the Candy Man. I like how some people spoke English when they're obviously in Britain. They actually never said that they're in England, Britain, but it was kind of implied. But there was people speaking with an American accent, then a British accent that were in Britain. You know, it was kind of back and forth. But yeah, the Willy Wonka, Gene Wilder. Like, dude, you'll catch me sometimes singing, you know, some of the songs that they have in it. You know, come with me and you'll see a wonderful imagination. You'll see me singing that.
Yeah.
Sometimes myself. So, yeah. So a lot of people just went like, really? I'm like, well, I was a little boy and I love that movie. So eat it.
For me, my top five, and I actually have mine in no particular order, are Tommy Boy, Ghostbusters, Scarface, Clerks 2, and The Dark Knight.
I can't go wrong with that.
And like
I never saw Clerks though.
Clerks 2, I thoroughly enjoy. Like Clerks 1 is its own entity movie because like how like when it came out in like the early 90s and then was made and everything. But like 2 came out in like 2006 or 7. I can't remember what. Yeah. But I remember watching that in the theater. And then right outside of there, I would probably put Godfather. Like I've went to the theater to go see that movie because like I'm a sucker for we're re-releasing a movie, even if it's just for a day in a movie theater. And I managed to go to when they did it for Godfather. Just such a good movie. I just sat down with my wife not that long ago because she had never seen it. I'm like, all right, we're watching this because I love this movie.
It's a great movie. I watch it. I got another 6 hours. I'll sit down and watch it, you know.
And like anytime we get something like that's cannoli, I'm like, leave the gun, take the cannoli.
Take the cannoli.
So yeah, that would be it. Any final thoughts or last minute plugs before we go?
No, man, I'm almost done. So I would say, you know, August 12th, you know, come to IWC in beautiful Elizabeth, Pennsylvania, and see me get into a steel cage match with the owner, Justin Plummer. I finally get him in the cage. So come on out and see that. And then I've got maybe 5 or 6 more shows. Check it on Fight TV. I'm up at Greektown in Canada, Fight TV. You'll never know when my last match will be. So, but it's coming. And I want to thank everyone out there for all the support over the years. It actually meant a lot to me. So thank you. I'm just hoping you get at least one random gauntlet for the gold appearance. Because those are that's my retire. That's my coming back out of retirement for one night to get you know, kind of a thing. But you know, that's going to be my deal. Just let me come back in for random gauntlets and, you know, battle royals and stuff. But other than that, I'm good. Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, that pretty much like wraps it up for me. I mean, yeah, I got my social media. Jay Summers 330, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Hive, Threads. Got the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, but like I can't really plug all that stuff because shit's over. Shit's over. Fun. Yeah, man. Hey, man, we're done, baby. I'm glad that this is the last podcast I'm going to do. So if it's your last one, this is it, man. I'm glad to be your first. I'm glad to be your last. Yeah, and I mean, much like you, I mean, I might have things that I might come out and do, but like Wrestling Cheers, done. That's never coming back. The Ohio Indy Report's never coming back. We're wrapping this shit up. Well, good luck to you, man. My cat got in the way here.
My cat has been outside of my office door, and like I know he's been like scratching at it because it'll move a little bit. And I'm
That's
like,
Melvin here, man.
beautiful orange tabby. We have one too, named oddly enough, named Brownie.
Brownie. Well, I'm wondering how I got that name.
Because I wanted to name him after something Browns related, and literally it was right. We're talking like right before, or no, it was like right around the time of the Browns Steelers playoff game, and I'm like, I'm not naming my fucking cat Baker or Mayfield. I'm not doing it. I'm like, he's not going to last. Something's going to happen, and I'm going to regret it. And I'm like, you know what? I love the Brownie the elf. I've always loved that logo. Let's name him Brownie. So yeah, that's what he's named after.
Well, there you go. At least you don't have any expectations for anything, right?
Yeah, he's a fairly pushover cat, much like the Browns sometimes. But anyway, that wraps everything up. That will do it for us here on Wrestling Cheers, where everybody knows your name, and it's closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Later.
Yeah, we going home. We're done.
It's the Wrestling Cheers. Get up on your feet, brightening your day in the middle of the week. And you gotta love the show. Yeah, you know it holds a title for the best podcast talking wrestling in Ohio. Finishing a cold one, take a load off. We ain't all about the prohibition like Josh, so we cheers. And then we sit back. Other shows are in the trash, kinda like they Nick Stapp. Like the name is Matt Justice, wearing all the gold. Wrestling Cheers is coming to a close. The #1 podcast going in the game. And one day everybody's gonna know the name. It's the Wrestling Cheers. This is Platinum Max, signing off. Ohio, good night. The world, good night. We love you. We'll see you next week.
The beat goes like this. Boom, 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 kick, kick, boom, boom, kick, boom, boom, kick, kick, boom, 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 kick, kick, boom, 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 kick, kick, boom, 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 kick, boom, boom, kick, boom.
That's like the most important part of the track. It's like. Rolling up in the whip, turn it up, that's my shit. Living life ain't no skit, set it up, let it rip. Rhymes are whack, flow in debt, I am here to collect. Coming through to flip the script, all this noise needs to shift. How many rappers repeat the same bit? How many times will you say, this rips? Flying high up in the cockpit, dropping bombs on your frauds, counterfeit. Step up to the mic and transmit, calling out your frauds, counterfeit. Same old flows and beats, y'all, the culprit. Calling out your frauds, y'all, counterfeit. DJ Turtle, all ones and twos. Yeah. With your alt backs to gaslit, looking like some kind of reject list. Creeping for some static to get your wig split. Smash you in the face, down in the fight pit. Force you to back inside like a hermit. Make sure you don't operate without a permit. Lamping round your house, having to be baby shit. Calling out your frauds, counterfeit.
The beat like this. Boom. The beat like this.